Have you ever wanted to create natural lip balms at home? Well, in this video, I'm going to go over all the steps needed so that you can create natural lip balms at home safely. So I could just go ahead and give you a full formula right now, just off the bat, like you will have readily available on the internet. But I decided actually just yesterday that I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I'm going to teach you how to make these lip balms. I figured, why don't I instead just create like a framework for you to work within instead of giving you an exact formula, which I will give you an exact formula, but just in case you don't like my choice of ingredients, you have options. For example, if I used beeswax in my formula and you were vegan, then my formula would be of absolutely no use for you. Or if you had a serious nut allergy and I used almond oil, then what good would that be? There are also such a wide selection of beautiful oils and butters out there that you might just want to play around a little bit. But how? Lip balms are not that complicated, and that's why I'm happy that we're starting with this one. With my instructions, you will be able to incorporate your own oils, your own butters, as you wish within certain limits. For starters, a real formulator is not a recipe follower. So how do formulators create these things? Well, we have these things called formulation sheets. We're gonna fill one of these out for our own purposes, and I'm gonna show you what kind of tweaks you can make to it within reason. As far as the formula goes, you want to be able to refer back to whatever product you created very easily as necessary. It's like a safety measure that you as a formulator need to take. For example, I have here a lip balm that I have previously formulated. And just because this is a homemade product, just for my own use, I've written directly on the tube, which obviously if you were to sell these, you wouldn't do. But I wrote the name of the product and the date that it was prepared right on the tube itself. This allows me to come back to the formula sheet that I have saved in my archives and find the product by the name and the date that it was prepared easily. The second thing on the formulation sheet is the batch size. Batch size means overall how much product you're going to prepare in a given beaker. And in order for us to create 3 lip balms in this video, we have to consider the size of the container that the lip balm solution liquid is going into. So these lip balms happen to be 1/3 of an ounce each, which in total is about 1 ounce. But I know from pouring these in the past that what happens when you pour the lip balm into the tubes is that some of the product tends to get stuck on the beaker, and that will never come out. It usually looks even worse than this in many cases, where it's all over the beaker and you're gonna lose a lot of product in the process, especially if you intend to not reheat the formulation again, because some ingredients like the vitamin E oil that works as an antioxidant in here does not like high heat. So if you want to make sure that you do not have to reheat it again, you need to keep in mind that you're gonna need some extra. So for 3 lip balm tubes, I would make more than an ounce, probably 1.5 ounces. Maybe that's too much. 1 1/3. So now the next part of the sheet looks a little bit intimidating, I agree. As a beginner, you might be looking at this like, oh dear lordy, I don't know what to do there. Well, I'm gonna show you what exactly to do there. In this formula, we're gonna be using cetyl alcohol, castor oil, kokum butter, candelilla wax, coconut oil, jojoba oil, apricot oil, and vitamin E oil. You can see that I've listed all the ingredients into one list here. However, this is not by volume. This is listed by phases. And by phases, I mean organizing them by letter into your work order. And in the case of this formula, what we're actually looking at is we need to combine cetyl alcohol, castor oil, kokum butter, candelilla wax, coconut oil, jojoba oil, and apricot oil in a beaker and melt it together before we can add the vitamin E oil in the end, because vitamin E oil cannot be added to hot oils or heated. So this is actually my formula from another video, and it has the wrong amounts on it, so do not try to look at those numbers. We're gonna write in our numbers based on the amount that we need to make, which is going to be more than 30 grams, and we're gonna have our own formula written out in here. So I wanted to also share with you guys where I have purchased the ingredients from. Everything except the cetyl alcohol is off Amazon. But at the time that you're watching it, these might not be available and you might have to order them from somewhere else. Amazon is very convenient, but personally, I trust stores like Formulator Sample Shop a lot more. So if you go to Formulator Sample Shop to order cetyl alcohol, you might also want to check out if they offer any of these other ingredients and order them from there. As you get into this, just be mindful of the fact that you might have to prepare this batch twice or more times in order to get it right. But if you were to purchase the ingredients from these manufacturers, then you're probably gonna have good luck on first try. The next two sections here are kind of advanced. So you got your purpose and action of ingredients and then the technical details. Technical details mean something like for cetyl alcohol, for example, it is not safe to use just endless amounts of it and apply that on your skin. You're supposed to be using it at a usage rate of 3 to 10%. So that is something that I'm gonna write here just to remember that. And that information is available on Formulator Sample Shop website together with other safety information that they have provided on cetyl alcohol. So when you use something like cetyl alcohol, you know that it's not just your regular olive oil. You need to look into it a little bit more. The truth being told, you need to look into everything. But the oils and waxes and butters that we have chosen here are safe as is on the skin. So we don't need to look into technical details on those. The purpose and action simply means what its purpose is in the formula. And this kind of now ties into your swap options, because a lip balm, just like any beauty product, it is created on a certain foundation. The foundation ingredients is what gives it the texture that it's known for. Like a lip balm, you know that it's a waxy stick. It's not a lotion, it's not runny, it's not just an oil, it's a waxy stick. That is what the foundation is about. And when you swap ingredients, you cannot risk changing the foundation. And if you want my help in creating this natural lip balm, then you need to stay within certain guidelines and certain percentages when you're choosing the ingredients that you're swapping. And let's go over that. So a formula always totals out to 100%. And generally speaking, vitamin E oil is typically used at 1%. It is a functional ingredient in the sense that it is meant to just keep the oils and butters in the lip balm from going rancid over time. I initially got the inspiration for this formula from the Aquaphor lip balm. And so I have chosen to use a very high amount of cetyl alcohol in this lip balm in order to achieve something similar to that in texture. This is something that you cannot play with without changing the foundation of this lip balm. If you were to use any more or less of cetyl alcohol in your formula, you would end up with a completely different texture and hardness in your lip balm. The ingredients that you can play around with are castor oil, cocoa butter, candelilla wax, jojoba oil, and apricot oil. Couple things to mention here though. Castor oil is thick. Jojoba oil is thick. Those affect the end result. Coconut oil, I do not recommend swapping that for anything because as we all know, coconut oil in cooler temperatures hardens. It's no longer runny. So you cannot replace your coconut oil. So if I were to be completely safe and wanted to make sure that nothing changes too much, I would only play with the butter, the wax, and this amount of oil. So if there's some other oil that you have that's clean, ideally organic, unrefined, and cold pressed, then you might want to try it and see if that works out. And the other thing that you might want to swap is the butter. There are many different butters out there, but you have to know that some of them are grainier than others and some are harder than others. For example, cocoa butter is extremely hard. Shea butter is grainy. So again, you'd have to test and find out. Candelilla wax is the other thing that you could swap, potentially to beeswax or carnauba wax. Overall, I think candelilla wax is slightly harder than beeswax, so again, you might end up with a different result. My recommendation is that you do not swap any of these ingredients and that you try your hardest to get them from the same manufacturer that I did. Now the fun part, and the part that I know that some of you are probably like, oh God, no, the math. It's not as hard as it seems. And because you're following my formula, and if you're okay preparing enough lip balm to make 3 lip balms at once in about 1/3 of an ounce tubes, then you can just copy the amounts. You do not have to count anything. Even the percentages are irrelevant in that case. All you have to do is look at the exact gram amounts. And why do we count in grams? Because they're more accurate. That is something that in the cosmetic industry is done across the board, all over the world, and it's not something that I would play around with. We do not measure ingredients in tablespoons and teaspoons, and we do not measure them in ounces. In America, you do see on the final product, you see the amount in the tube mentioned in ounces, but even that lab never formulated that in ounces. They used grams. How do you measure grams exactly? Well, you need a scale. And I recommend that you invest in a scale that is of 100th percentile accuracy. In formulating, 0.02 grams matters, especially when we start talking about ingredients that might have some skin sensitizing side effects. It is vital to be able to see your numbers that accurately. A scale is something that you're gonna have to invest in order to prepare this formula. Luckily, they don't usually cost a whole lot. So if you were to get one, then maybe on the side when you're not formulating, you could use it as a kitchen scale. And now the fun part, let's do the math. Next, before we can actually start making this, we need to write in the steps in our procedure, which are very simple. We're going to mix together the phase A ingredients in a beaker and melt them in a gentle water bath. And once we take the melted phase A out of the water bath, we're gonna let it cool down to below 40 degrees or close. We'll see, we're working with a very tiny amount, so that's a little bit hard, but we're gonna try. I have a thermal gun, which is a great purchase if you have one, or maybe you could use some kind of other kitchen thermometer for this, but use your own discretion on that. And once we add the vitamin E oil, we're going to pour the liquid into the lip balm tubes in 3 parts. And then we're just gonna let it cool and set and try it on 24 hours later. So we're basically just writing down those steps here, and then we can start. You never want to go and start formulating until you know exactly what your step-by-step process is. If you just go there and start thinking about it over there while you already have your ingredients out and you don't know what tools to get out, it is messy and you're just bound to fail because there's too many balls up in the air. A real formulator has a clean sheet of paper, a full plan of execution, and they knock it out of the park. At least most of the time. Sometimes there's been some horrible fails, but I'm trying to have you feel confident about your own abilities, okay? You'll be fine as long as you write it all down and you follow the instructions. Just listen to the instructions. We're gonna do this.